JB here, JB here. Hope everyone's doing outstanding. June 11th, 2024. Really quick for a pre-market rant. Talk about some of the names I'm looking at, some of the names I got in yesterday. Talk about the markets. Go from there. Take a look at the S&P. Was up over 1/3% yesterday. Choppy trade in the morning. Melted higher into the afternoon. We had that Apple WW Developers Conference. And it seems they've had some announcements over the years at that event, and some are saying this is the next stage in their growth, right? The App Store, which they were failing to monetize, that turned out to be a big driver. Now it's going to be AI. They announced a partnership. They're going to integrate OpenAI on their phones. Elon Musk didn't like that. But needless to say, it almost seems a little bit like Apple was behind the eight ball on this, and they're trying to play some catch up. Some are saying this is going to be the start of the next leg to Apple shares. And some of it, people are looking as well as that it could be the start of a refresh cycle, right? The big thing for especially for Apple is when people feel compelled to upgrade their phones because they don't think they're going to get the same performance. I don't know. I go through all my iPhones over the years, and I rarely see much performance in regards to anything but the battery. I mean, the screen looks nicer, pictures look better, but is that really the reason to upgrade your phone? To me, the reason you upgrade your phone is if you smash your screen or whatever, and then you have to, or you're on the lease program, whatever. So that's Apple. So that kind of got out of the way. Market this morning on Market Watch, Apple stocks flashing a bearish engulfing candle. Like, how many stocks have bearish engulfing candles every couple weeks or whatever? So they make it sound like it's flashing this big sell signal, but it was down quite a bit yesterday. And you take a look where it's come from. Is there room for a little chop here before the next leg? Possibly. So that's the markets. Tomorrow's the big day. CPI at 8:30, and then we have the Fed meeting. Fed meeting at 2, statement at 2:30. Have to think that the big talking points will be around the dot plot for the Fed. How many rate cuts are going to be happening in 2024? Is it going to be 3? Is it going to be 2? Expectations are probably set at 2 right now, and then is it going to be in September for the first one? Which, if that's the case, and Powell can kind of paint that picture, I think the markets kind of hold up pretty well. And then CPI in the morning. Obviously, if it's hotter than expected, that could put a wrench in some things. So, and then you have to take a look. We also had that strong jobs report on Friday. So take that all together. Just hopefully CPI is in line or cooler. Powell can paint that picture of 2 cuts starting in September, and I think the market's good to go. And I always say new highs beget new highs. So maybe 540, 545, and then I'll start looking for some opportunities to play some hedges for downside. I mean, on the flip side, though, take a look at Europe markets today. The DAX is down nearly 0.75%. Some of them are off their lows, but that could portend maybe a little weakness here in U.S. markets. And then last but not least is the small caps. The small caps actually rallied 0.3, almost in line with the S&P yesterday, but the IWM is still under its 200-day moving average. So kind of frustrating. And then you would hope some of these biotech would also start to help put a bid in stocks. That has not happened. So hopefully that happens in the coming days and provides the next leg for markets. So that's IWM. That's the S&P, the SPY. On the upside, the upper Bollinger Band, I think it's around 536. And then if we do get some selling pressure, things get dicey, maybe 531, that's got to hold. And under 531 is probably where I would add a hedge. HPQ, not much to add here. Stock closed almost flat yesterday, well, down 27 cents. Still a nice bull flag setting up. I still think that heads over $40 in the coming weeks. Spotify announced another premium tier this morning. So it seems they're trending in raising prices, adding tiers, and growing their business. And to me, when companies do that, they're doing it out of a position of strength. So I don't think Spotify is saying, "Wow, we're struggling. Let's create a new premium tier," or "How we're struggling. Let's raise prices in Europe first and in the U.S. second." I think they're doing it from a position of strength. And I look at it and I had those spec calls last week, made some money, but then I held a few. I probably should have sold them all. And then this week, you look, nice little doji candle yesterday, 330, 335. Looks like it's back in play. I'll be watching. If the market gets a little dicey, Spotify's kind of fickle, so it might sell with the markets. But if it does find a bid at the open around 316 or so, I may look for some spec calls to play for a move into the 330s and back to all-time highs. A turn. I was posting on FinTwit yesterday afternoon, right at the close. Turn had a nice spike into the end of the day. It looked like it was going to close at 7, and it closed at 6.99. Frustrating, to say the least, because that $7 handle has been like oil and vinegar. one of these days, it starts to break into the mid sevens and higher, and just doesn't look back. It's 8, 9, 10. Hopefully those days are happening very soon. But a nice upward channel outside of that big pull off, a big sell off we had last Friday. Still love turns for upside. I'm not going to add anything more. Still riding some of the freebie June and July's, and add of those other July strikes. I'll continue to hold those. I'm still watching GPCR too. Almost flat as a pancake yesterday. Good. The good thing with GPCR is that it had that huge move from 35 all the way up to near 60, and now it's just been, well, actually over 60, and now it's just been churning. It's been consolidating those gains. Usually when you have a huge move like that, not a big pullback, and it consolidates, that means buyers are still there. And once those sellers kind of dissipate a little bit, then it's off to the next leg to the upside. I think 70 plus, so I'll continue to look for opportunities to play that one for upside. And then on the flip side, if markets do get a little dicey, we find some sellers today, people a little concerned ahead of the CPI data tomorrow morning and the Fed tomorrow afternoon. Of Broadcom reports after, I think they report Thursday. Is it Thursday? Now I have to pull this up so I get the exact date. But their premiums are inexpensive, not inexpensive. They're unplayable. It's actually a report tomorrow after the close. So they're too expensive for me to play as a spec hedge play. So typically I would get the weekly strikes, but the week, since they have earnings, the premiums are insane for me to try and play those. So I'll look for ServiceNow as a name I've traded before. It had some rough earnings, and I think some of it sold off in tandem with Salesforce 2 weeks ago. It's kind of bounced back over that 700 handle, but I think if the market does find a little selling pressure today, that's a name I'll be looking for possible uh, inexpensive hedges, maybe the 675, 670s I was looking this morning. Lamb Research is another one. That just hit almost, I think it hit almost all-time highs, closed over $1,000 for the first time ever, I believe, yesterday, up 4%. That's having that they have a split coming. So typically those names run up into splits, but if we do get some selling pressure, that's another name I might look for hedges on downside. So those are the names I'll be watching today. I'm trying to think of some of these others. GameStop, just crazy. Roaring Kitty comes out, updates his position, and shows that he at one point, I guess if it went to $65, his position would have been $1 billion, and now it's down to like 300 million or something to that effect, and he's still holding. And I listened to his YouTube video, and it was like it was very confusing. Right? If people were hinging on the hope that there was gonna be some revelation that he was gonna announce at that YouTube video, he more or less just to dismiss that. So I don't know. He's still a believer in Ryan Cohen and that whole transformation. I mean, that's many years ago, right? So if that transformation hasn't happened, what's that look like? I don't know. I'm not saying not to be bullish GameStop, or maybe it squeezes. And I've said this before. I think more of it's a proxy right now. Stick it to the man. But when does he sell? His strikes expire in 2 weeks. Is he is he going to hold those strikes? Is he going to roll them over? So that's that. That's GameStop. What else was I looking at? EMVX, Apple, HPQ. I mean, Dell looked like it was going to break out yesterday. It's the first time I don't have the Dell chart up here because I'm kind of sick of talking about it. Broke back over 130, was looking really good in the early morning, gave back some of those gains, and it's down a little bit here in the pre-market. Still like that one for upside. Oh, and then last, but I haven't talked about in a while, EMVX. You can see the stock hitting the upper Bollinger Band, closed over 11. What did it hit? 11? It hit 1170 yesterday, down here at 1139. Not much to add. I forget the last time I even did the rant on EMVX. I don't know if it's when they did the announcement that they were doing customer sampling. They're going to send customer sampling. If you go back in their press releases over the years, they've said we are sending samples out to customers many multiple times. So has their tech changed that much? This 17-year-old company, they have 60 patents. Maybe it's 50 patents. But it's a tough one because there's a huge uh, I guess you call it like a contingent, same that I talked about with Riley, Trupanion, those same folks, they're all in it. I had to block folks on my FinTwit account, and I had stopped talking about because it's just not worth what the stress and the time and effort to try and refute what those folks are saying. And they're bullish on the name regardless of anything that comes out. So I uh, it's tough for me. Obviously, it's up quite a bit. I'm not going to add any more puts. At some point, I will, depending. It's just there's no catalysts to speak of, and the only catalysts that there probably are going to be some other some other press release from the company saying they sent 1.7 more samples to some unnamed company, and they say it's under the guise of a non-disclosure agreement. So if you have an NDA with companies, that means your technology is phenomenal, right? But if your technology is phenomenal, why wouldn't someone not buy you out, right? I just, again, I can go on rants for a while, and I've talked about Longfin and Nikola. I'm trying to think the other. I think those are the big two ones. When I came up negative on those names, I had puts. I was pretty confident that they were, well, I won't call them, I'm not calling uh, ENVX a fraud, right, per se, because I don't think that they're fraudulent. I just think that they're a zero at some point, because they're selling a commoditized product that eventually, they're either gonna, well, anyway. So when I was talking about Elfin and Nikola, the stocks soared after I came out with my bearish thesis on those names. And Longfin, I think, was 20 or $30. It went up to like 70, 80. And then I think they got added to the small cap index only because their market capitalization became so big that they were forced to, as a procedural kind of thing, and the stock spiked even more. And I'm sitting in puts. And then, a couple days later, it gets halted. FTC, they had to get stop the CEO from getting on a plane. It was a whole fiasco, but my short thesis came to 100% fruition. Same with Nikla, and I wrote way before all these other folks about it. Didn't take much time to say something's not right here. So I'm not saying with ENVX, I'm not saying that they're a fraud. I just think that the product's never going to come to fruition. They're going to continue to spend hundreds and hundreds of millions of dollars to try and make this product come to fruition, and it's not going to happen. And it's being held up by folks who think this is the next best thing since sliced bread. Like they look at it and say, it's the best battery company. I said, best battery company. The company's been around for 17 years. If it was the best battery, someone would have bought them out. And if you look pre SPAC, they were valued at $100 million on an offer on their last fundraise. $100 million. But then TJ Rogers, who had a large position in EMVX, he creates a blank check company and rolls EMVX into it at 1,000% valuation. So he took it, it was 100 million. He was able to get it to $1.7 billion valuation just because he took his SPAC and rolled it into it and got people in on it, and he made tons of money. So rants for other days. The question would be, is he didn't roll that SPAC into the blank check. If the SPACs weren't around, number one, would EMVX even exist? Probably not. And even if they did, would the valuation should not be up here? Even, and then I don't know if I've said this on my rants, but I'm like, even if they execute, they're in a battery, their battery gets taken on by some phone company. They have to sell like 100 million of these batteries a year, because they usually are like 11, $10. So that's $1 billion in revenues. They make maybe 15, 20% profit margins on that. And so your valuation, and if you look at the peers and the peer group, and it was a nice paper someone wrote showing that the peers of premium phone battery companies are 1 times revenues. So that would equate to a $1 billion company. They're one point, I don't even want to look right now. They might be close to 2 billion. So rants for other days. This way you can understand and get see where my head is at with that. Why I look at the name and I got those puts, and I'll wait for now because it can defy gravity for a heck of a lot longer uh, than I can. So that's about it, folks. Let's have a great day. We've got about 34 minutes to the open. Rock and roll.